Okay, welcome into the All Pokes podcast. This week we're going to be looking at Bedlam, and it'll be the last Bedlam, so it should be a good one. I've got Nick Friesen here with me today. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing good. Excited for this weekend. Excited for potentially the last Bedlam for foreseeable future. So just ready to get to Saturday.
Oh yeah, this Saturday should be a real fun game. I think we should start though by looking back at last week and how OSU did against Cincinnati. How'd you feel about that game?
So I came into the game, I think, kind of really confident that OSU is going to move the ball, continue what it's been doing with Ollie Gordon, the offensive line, and they showed that. Gordon, two straight 250-yard games now, first person since Barry Sanders now. The offensive line is starting to see some continuity and see, okay, these are the five guys that we need out there to give us the best chance to win. And Cincinnati came out hot, but showed their inconsistency this season, later half in the second half. So, yeah, I kind of just expected that game to play out that way, and glad the Cowboys got a W.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a little closer than it was, but it was a really close game there at halftime, and then second half they just kind of took off. Ollie Gordon had another really good game, 25 carries, 271 yards, couple of touchdowns, including that 75-yarder at the end. Looked like they were just going to try to get him over 200, and he just took it all the way. Um,
Yeah.
Solid game from Alan Bowman. Leon Johnson, he came onto the scene. That'll be interesting going into this weekend for sure.
Yeah, we'll see with like all the injuries because Gundy usually kind of keeps that on the down low. So we'll see what they have at the wide receiver position. But he did say on Monday that they don't see him redshirting Johnson or even keeping him off the field for any time soon. So I think Johnson's going to have to play a big role this weekend. I think so.
Right. And then we'll get into the Bedlam preview now. I think the first and obvious place to start is just with Ollie Gordon.
Yeah, I think OU's defense ranked 52nd in rushing. They in the first half of the season they really stopped them, really stopped the run. That was their main focus, and then ever since the Texas game, which I think they put all their heart and effort and soul into that game. Ever since that, they've had a hard time stopping anything, but especially the run. And they gave up 225 against Kansas. And Gordon got more than that, but combined last week. So I
Right.
think we'll see. The Cowboy offensive line does have a test this week, but I think if they can just continue to stick to their set of plays and Gordon can continue to stick to like his keys and what he does best, I think they'll have a good shot to win this game on Saturday.
Oh yeah, definitely. These last two games, Ollie Gordon has just really gone off on the ground. He had that really good game rushing and receiving against Kansas, but then on the ground the last couple of weeks, 553 yards, 6 touchdowns in those two games. Last week, got over 1,000 yards rushing on the season, became the national rushing leader. I mean,
Yeah.
Oklahoma's going to have their hands full here this weekend trying to stop him. And then you
Yeah.
have on the other side for OU, they're going to be trying to match Ollie Gordon with their own Heisman candidate, Dylan Gabriel. And, he's had a solid season. Not a great outing last week at OU, but the weather probably had a factor in that. How do you think he's going to do this week?
I mean, it's just supposed to be a perfect day on Saturday. So I think that he'll get back to his regular basics, the consistency that he's always shown. He's has plenty of experience. He's in the 50 range for total starts for his career. Yeah, I just think it's like what Mike Gundy said on Monday. They're going to try to get him out in the middle of the field, try to get the ball spread out to different position players and get the ball just moving, get it to different players so they can make people miss. And Gabriel does that well with his consistency of just throwing a typical screen route or a typical drag route or anything to Gavin Freeman or Drake Stoops. So I think he'll just get back to his basics, and that's probably what they've been preaching on Monday or during practice this week. Is you just get back to your basics, and you'll have a good chance to win all the games that you have for the rest of the season.
Right. It felt a little bit last week like they were kind of complicating things. And like I said, the weather had something to do with that, but it felt a lot like he just was not taking what was being given to him a lot of
Yeah,
times.
I I've heard a lot of people say that Jeff Levy was being a little too conservative, and I
Mhm.
personally agree with that.
Yeah.
With the way the game played, and that's kind of been, a opinion by some OU fans this whole season is he can sometimes get too conservative. But I think they should open up the play calling. I mean, they have nothing to lose now. They control their own destiny for a Big 12 title game and a possible CFP berth. So we'll just see. It should be a fun one on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, so far in the season, 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for him. We'll see if OSU can slow him down. Then on the other side, you got Alan Bowman. He's got some weapons to throw to. We'll see where he can go there. Who are you most excited to see in the receiving core on Saturday specifically?
Oh man, Brendan Presley always has a way to make Oklahoma look like stupid. To say,
Yeah, he's on my
20,
short list too.
2021, he returned probably the loudest I've ever heard Boone Pickens ever be. And then he had a good game last year against Oklahoma, and it just as the season has gone on this year, it just seems like Mike Gundy said more targets than they have been. He's getting more opportunities, and when he gets the ball in space, and it's going to be hard to get him down, and OU knows that. And so if they I think they got to get him at least probably 7 to 10 targets this game, just even so they can create that space and create those mismatches against the OU corners and get those touchdowns basically, and get them a chance to win.
Yeah, and I think for me with Presley, it's a lot of, you get those targets to him, but you also want to get him involved on the ground game a little bit. That's worked pretty well the last few weeks. He's got a couple of rushing touchdowns this season. And, that's one of the things that could throw OU off a little bit, because they're going to be also down and stopping Ollie Gordon, and they're probably not going to want Presley to burn them in the air. So if he gets it behind the line of scrimmage and gets in space early, that might be a problem.
Yeah.
We talked about Leon Johnson earlier. I don't think we know if Jaden Bray is good to go for Saturday or not. So
Yeah.
that could be a big story.
Yeah, Jaden Bray, don't know. Stribling will probably. I'm assuming he'll be out as well,
Yeah.
but we just don't know about most of the wide receiver core. And that's just how it's been the past couple of years with Gundy, and he just likes to keep it quiet. So we'll just have to keep look out for warm ups on Saturday to see who's available and see who's not.
Right. And Rashad Owens, he's been a pretty reliable target throughout the year, so he'll probably get his chance to make a few plays on Saturday. Then going on to the offensive line, you touched on it earlier about the way they've been playing much better recently, since the bye week, really, I think. And, just the way they've opened up holes for Ollie Gordon. And then these last 4 games, I think they've only given up 1 sack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think that can be attributed to?
It's like what Gundy said, ever since the South Alabama game, he said, okay, we're going to dumb this down and see these concepts and see what plays we are good at in these concepts. And he told that to the offensive line, and they said, we're going to make these the best plays that we could run and just going to stick to them. And I think it's repetition through the last 5 games. They got it going against Iowa State, but they still struggle a little bit. But as the 5 games go on and as reps go on, you start to get better, and it's just a natural habit. And I think the continuity as well with like the same 5 guys out there usually. And so, and then when you have a guy like Ollie Gordon, it's easy to block for. So, yeah, the offensive line just has been a surprising point, I think, so far for me this season.
Yeah, and I mean, every single post game, or just anytime Ollie Gordon talks, like that's the first thing that's brought up is those guys up front that are blocking for him, getting him into space, allowing him to have these big 271, 282-yard games. And, like I said, protecting Bowman, which is a really big thing to get him just some time back there because he's not a super mobile guy. So when he's got that time to work in the pocket and find his guys, not rush things, like I felt like that was a problem for him and the other quarterbacks early in the season.
Yeah, I feel like it's like what Gundy says is like when he gets his feet moving and he starts sliding a little bit, he can sometimes make some errant throws and mistakes. And I agree with him on this. You know, when he sets his feet and delivers the ball to someone, it's pretty efficient and pretty good. So,
Mhm.
and that's contributed to the offensive line play. Like you said it, 1 sack in the last 5 games, which is kind of going under the radar for some people this in this 5 game winning streak. But you know, Bowman's gonna have to have a great game on Saturday. Gonna have to make some big plays and make some big time throws, and he's done that against Oklahoma in his past games with them. So, yeah, I expect some pretty consistent and good things for him on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd like to see a few deep balls from him. You know, he's had a couple that have maybe gotten away from just a little overthrown. If he can connect on those, that's a really good sign for OSU
Yeah,
this
if we
weekend.
can connect on deep balls against the OU secondary, that will create that will open up the playbook in so many different ways. I think personally.
Yeah, and moving on to the OSU defense, you know, Oklahoma's not going to be easy to stop by any means, but the way OSU's defense has played the last few weeks, it feels like, you know, since the bye week, Mike Gundy preached about the physicality of the defense, really. And that's really been a big turnaround for them after missing so many tackles those first few games. You know, who are you watching for on defense this weekend?
So we talked about Dylan Gabriel and his consistency and stuff, and his how he likes to spread out the ball and stuff. So a guy like Cameron Epps or Kendall Daniels, who's trying to make those tackles on those OU wide receivers, are going to be huge this weekend. And then I think they found someone in the running game again last week against Kansas with Walker. And they finally found like a true number one guy they can go to because they've been struggling to find like a true number one guy so far this season, and they found it with Walker. So I think guys like Nick Martin and all the other linebackers and up front people on the defensive line will have to step up and make those stop the run. So then they can create these 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 situations where they have to pass, but they know they're going to pass, and so they can get in their good coverages and scheme ups and things that can cause problems for Oklahoma. And yeah, the defense is just going to have to play overall pretty well on Saturday.
Right. For me, for the defense, I mean, you mentioned Cameron Epps. He's going to be big. He's got 3 interceptions this year. So we'll see if he can do something against Gabriel in the passing game. But I really think for OSU, they've got a big three on defense. It's Nicholas Martin, Cullen Oliver, and Kendall Daniels. I feel like those three, you know, if OSU can get good games from all three of those guys, they're going to have a really good chance of winning. And, you know, Colin Oliver, last time this game was in Stillwater, he sealed it. That was as a freshman. He sacked Caleb Williams there on the final play. And, you know, not out of question for him to do that again because late in games, that's when he gets the green light to make a play on the quarterback.
That's what's really crazy is it's always, you don't see him. He's probably making plays in the first half, but it's usually the second half, and especially in the fourth quarter, where you see him just turn up the charge and he goes, okay, this is when my big playmaking ability needs to come in and create these stops. And he's done that the past at least 3 games and probably in all the 5 game winning streak as well.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, he's a linebacker now, but he's so dangerous when he does get that opportunity to
Yeah,
rush the quarterback.
I'm sure they'll put him at defensive end. They know what he's capable of to do against that OU offensive line when he's at the end. They've seen it, so
Yeah,
it should be interesting with him on Saturday.
I think especially if Gabriel gets off to a hot start there, he's gonna
Oh
be on the
yeah,
line there real quick.
yeah, 100%.
And then, you know, let's look at the past couple of games for Bedlam. You know, you touched on last year a little bit with, Presley having a solid outing, but OSU never had a chance in that game. They went down 28-0 first quarter, and things just spiraled out of control from there. They didn't give up any points the rest of the game, but it didn't matter.
Yeah, the offense had no consistency. It didn't seem like we had a true identity on offense last year, and I think there was some off the field stuff that were going on, as you can see with what happened with Spencer Sanders that day.
Mhm.
But yeah, they showed nothing on offense last year to even have a shot to win that game, especially
Yeah,
with
and
the OU team that was coming with a pretty terrible defense, I would say.
you talk about Spencer Sanders and his, kind of off-field situation there. How about Trace Ford? I don't know if you saw his comments from today
I did
about
see them.
basically how Gundy and the staff did not care that he was leaving, and that's not a
Uh,
great look for OSU.
yeah. Um, that's probably the way my Gundy thinks and works and stuff. You want to put your name in the transfer portal? Okay, fine, go ahead. I mean, we can always regroup and reload. And that probably rubbed the wrong way as it did with Trace Ford and probably some of the other dudes that entered the portal last year. But I, Trace Ford, he'll he'll be ready for Saturday. I know he'll probably want to get some stops and get some tackles on either Presley or any of those dudes, and he's going to want to prove a point on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about that in his interview, whenever, they were talking about Gundy and all the things that he had said, back in the past about that, and, how Gundy basically hadn't really been watching him on film and anything, and Trace Ford wants to make it a point to, like, hey, you're going to see me this
Yeah,
Saturday. So
yeah.
that's
I mean,
definitely a big storyline.
yeah, we'll see. I mean, that like you said, that'll be a big storyline to see. And that whole defensive line as a whole for Oklahoma is really solid. So if he can make some plays, that'll give him a good chance to keep this game close and maybe pull it out. Who knows?
Just a really unique storyline to have, a Bedlam matchup where you have a guy who used to be on the other team now.
Yeah,
That doesn't happen
yeah,
in college football much at all.
yeah. I mean, you take a look at like Kelly Maxwell. She left OSU softball
Mhm.
for OU, and you've seen all the off the field stuff about that where Kenny Gajewski has said some stuff about it and everything, and it just seems like if you leave for a different school is one thing, but if you leave for your rival school, it's a whole different thing.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, Bedlam as the last Bedlam matchup as a whole is a storyline, but then all these other storylines in it, where with Gundy saying about Bosworth. He spit in my face. I spit back at him, and then Bosworth chimed in on Twitter and stuff. And it's going to be a fun one on Saturday to see all the
Yeah,
people out there and everything.
it's going to be very heated, with it being the last Bedlam. And, let's just transition into that. Will we get Bedlam again in the future? Certainly doesn't seem like in the near future.
Mm-mm. Gundy said on Monday it'll probably be a bowl game for the next couple of years, and he's probably right on that. Like Bedlam's
Mhm.
history in the regular season for the time being. It's not that they don't want to. It's just there's so much holes they have to get through to even talk about it and even get it scheduled on there. And so SEC and Big 12 always have a good relationship in the bowl games. They always play each other in like the Sugar Bowl or in the CFP, it's the Orange
Mhm.
Bowl or whatever. And so yeah, with the 12-team playoff next year, you could see a Bedlam matchup and next year if we get it. So
Yeah,
that
that
would be
would be
surely
crazy.
interesting. Yeah, Bedlam's over, but we'll probably here it is again next year.
Right. And I think with Bedlam, with all the conference realignment going on, I don't think it's impossible if OSU gets an invite to the SEC that's the next time we see a Bedlam matchup, is if they're in the same conference again.
Yeah, I've always had this in the back of my mind. This is my like whole take is I'm fully believing in like 5 to 10 years we'll have like three super conferences. And I think OSU and OU will be in the same super conference. And so it's just the way the conference realignment's working
Mhm.
right now. I mean, it all started with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, and then it just kind of spiraled with UCLA, USC, and all of them in the Big Ten. And then we get Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, all those schools, and then BYU, UCF, Houston, and all of them this year. It's just only going to continue to get crazier as every off season, and so yeah, times are changing in college football, and it's college football has never been more exciting than it is this year and this season.
Right. And, I touched on it there with maybe an SEC, OSU, OU will be back together. And that's what happened with Texas and Texas A&M. They haven't played since their last Big 12 matchup. They'll get their first one next year when they're in the SEC together.
Yeah,
So, you
exactly.
know, probably that can't possibly be the only time that a rivalry breaks up and then gets back together just because they join the same conference again. Um, so we'll see. Uh, Next up, I think it's time for some hot takes for the weekend. You got any bold predictions that you're kind of dwelling over?
I've been thinking about this with the wide receiver department. I think Rashad Owens is going to have at least 2 touchdowns this week.
Oh, okay.
Um, I don't know why. It just seems like one of these dudes that is an experienced wide receiver for OSU. You know, where you got Presley, but it just seems like one of them has to have a coming out party, and I think it might be him. Or if Jaden Bray plays, he could have one as well. But I just think the wide receiver department is probably going to show out this weekend against Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, so far in the season, Owens only has 1 touchdown, so a 2 touchdown game this weekend would be,
Yeah,
a big time performance.
yeah,
I think for me, it's going to be, I think OSU just jumps out ahead early. I think all the emotions and everything, and they might, just spring up 14-0, kind of like they did in the Kansas State game. I feel like the start's going to be somewhat similar. They had a lot of emotions that week. That was, the first win of this winning streak. And, this being the last Bedlam, I think you could see similar emotions coming out, just that attitude, from the jump. I think
yeah.
that can really help OSU.
The first 8 minutes of the game will tell us, okay, what's the emotion like? What's the physicality like between the two teams? Who's here to get play? Who's here to just patty cake with someone and then hopefully come out and win? And so, yeah, the good start for OSU will have to happen on Saturday.
Yeah. I have one more hot take. I'm not sure how hot it is. I think Ollie Gordon goes for 200 again. That's just been his season right now, and I think that's just going to continue this against the Sooners.
He's gonna get his carries, and he's gonna break one at least for like 50 or 60 in the game. It's just bound to it's bound to happen every game. It's just what the amount of carries he gets, and so that's probably a pretty good take right there. Yeah.
All right, let's get our score predictions for Bedlam. Where are you going?
So I just think with OSU and the way they've been running their offense these last 5 games, I just don't think OU, even with a week to prepare, can stop it with the rushing attack with Gordon and the whole offensive line as a whole. So I'm gonna say Oklahoma State 37, OU 30. I think it will be a high scoring game, and I think Bowman and the wide receivers will connect on some plays, and then Gordon will just continue to have his strong outings. And so, give me the Cowboys in this one.
We have almost identical score predictions, but I'm going the other way. I think OU wins 38-30. Like I said with OSU, I think they get out to a really hot start, but I think there's going to be a big emotional drop off there. They're going to expend a lot of emotion there in those first 15 minutes or so, I think, and I think that might come back to bite them. It's the last Bedlam. They're going to be in front of their home crowd, and the crowd's going to be loud the entire game, I'm sure. But I feel like those early minutes are going to dominate, and then they're going to let up a little bit. OU's going to creep back in, and then we get to the fourth quarter. I think that's where Dylan Gabriel just kind of takes over, gets OU down the field, and I think that'll be, just a little too much for OSU to overcome.
Yeah, I'll end this with one more. The defense, OU's defense is gonna have to have Danny Stutzman on there. If he's not playing, OSU has a great shot to win. If he's playing,
Absolutely.
Stutzman, just his leadership as a whole is remarkable for OU, and he's a great linebacker as well. So he'll make some plays, even if he is like a 70 or 60%. He'll still be a dominant person on the defense for OU. So I think if he plays, OSU will have a tough time. But if he doesn't, I think OSU can get established run game and get things going. So I can't wait for Saturday, man.
Yeah, it should be a really fun game. Really, regardless of the outcome, I just really hope this is a really fun last Bedlam game. It's coming down to the wire because that's what this rivalry really deserves to finish out.
Yeah, no blowouts. If there's a blowout, that'll be devastating for the last Bedlam between either team. It'll just be devastating. But they need to have a good last final showing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, Bedlam this weekend, it's a big game for OU and OSU, just for the schools as a whole for Bedlam, but it's also big for the Big 12 title race. We got a five-way tie at the top right now, 4-1 between five teams, sorry. Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Texas, and Iowa State. How do you see this all shaking out? Because there's a lot to be determined these last few weeks.
So I've heard a lot of people say this week, just on different radio stations, that they think whoever loses in these three games between Bedlam, Texas, Kansas State, and Iowa State, Kansas are elimination games, and I just don't see that with how the parity is in the Big 12. Um, starting the season, it was okay, Texas, and then OU if they can get over the hump. Those are the two teams, and then now you look up, and it's those two teams plus OSU, Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, and all of them. And so I think, oh gosh, if OSU wins on Saturday, they have a great shot if they to control their own destiny and make the Big 12 championship and possibly play at Texas or Kansas State or whatever. But yeah, this week is one of the first of like many weeks that the Big 12 will get laid out, and we'll see who the three best teams are and who are just pretenders.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there with, this weekend having maybe eliminations games. I'm with you. I don't think that's the case by any means. I think, the teams who win, specifically Bedlam and Texas, Kansas State this weekend, those two teams, whoever wins, I think they're in the driver's seat for the Big 12 title game, no doubt. They'll have full control over their own destiny the rest of the way. But also, the Big 12 has just been kind of wild this year. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we get down to, after Thanksgiving weekend, all games are played, we have, like a 7-2 conference record for 4 different teams or something like that. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But there's just.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, coming out of Thanksgiving break, I expect the OSU BYU game to be, a game for OSU if they win, they make the conference championship. Like, that's just how it's going to be for the rest of the season is you're going to have to play your best football for the next how many weeks for you to even have a shot to make it to Arlington. Now, I think with OSU record 6-2, I think they're out of the CFP conversation, but if they go and win the Big 12 championship, it's automatic New Year's Six Bowl against a really good quality opponent. And usually when they do that in the New Year's Six Bowls, like 2 years ago with Notre Dame, they usually show up and show out. And, we have a brand two type thing like Mike Gundy. This Big 12 is going to get really interesting over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, like you said there, it's like New Year's Six and everything, that's going to be right there on the table for all these teams going into the final few weeks, not just who wins the conference and everything. It'll be, the Big 12 could send probably 3 teams to New Year's Six bowls pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot on the table here for, these final few weeks.
Yeah. I'll just say this, the team that I think is going to be a wild card in this is Kansas State. Ever since that OSU loss, they have dominated teams, to say the least. I don't know if we made them mad or what happened, but Kansas State, I think, is the wild card to where if all things go right, they'll be in Arlington with Oklahoma State or Texas or OU. So lots of fun
they're the
times.
defending Big 12 champs. So
that is true.
So much to come in these next few weeks, but you look ahead to the next 4 years, and OSU's Big 12 schedule, or the Big 12 schedule for everyone, has dropped. So now we see these opponents for the next, 24 through 27. What are your takeaways from OSU's opponents over the next few years?
That they can get it done and make it to the Big 12 championship if they want to. The game next year with Colorado is just going to be interesting in itself because of the Dion, the prime effect, and all those star players. But then he's going to get his recruits in as well, and so that game will be interesting. Obviously, another big takeaway is Ames, Iowa has been a struggle for us these past like couple of years, and we don't have to go there until 2026. And
Yeah,
so
only one
that's
trip there.
yeah, that's very very helpful. I just think with the overall how OU and Texas is leaving, and then the new teams coming in, I think there's going to be Utah, OSU, Kansas State will always be there, and then I think a Kansas will be there. I just think those four teams, and then Colorado, five teams. Then
Mm-hmm.
that's just the parity right there. I think those five teams will just have their name in the bucket for a Big 12 championship next year.
Yeah, and OSU next year they'll play Utah, they'll get Colorado, they'll get Kansas State. So you're gonna have some big games next season in the regular season for OSU. And that Colorado game, that's the one everyone's talking about, and I think for good reason. I mean, you got the Dion effect there. That'll be the first time OSU, Mike Gundy against Coach Prime. That's gonna be just
Is
a
that
coaching matchup.
game? Do you know if that game's here or is it in Boulder?
That's in Boulder. So that'll be OSU's first trip to Boulder, I think, since Colorado was in the Big 12.
Yeah,
They played in the
for
Alamo
sure.
Bowl a few years ago, but
Yeah.
But like you said, this conference is going to be wide open with OU and Texas leaving, with these Pac-12 schools coming in. There's so much parity, like you said, and there's just no way to predict what's going to happen. Because, I mean, you see Utah, they're struggling in the Pac-12 every once in a while here. They've had some slip-ups. All these teams in the Big 12, consistency from week to week is definitely not always there.
Yeah.
I mean, so much to be determined over these next few years.
It's just going to be like, with the Pac-12 this year, it's kind of like they have all these good teams, but at the same time, they're beating themselves up playing against each other. And they just show sometimes some of those teams show their inconsistency, like you said. And so I think that's what's going to happen with the Big 12 next year is there's going to be all these good teams, all these quality teams. Some of them may not be as good, but they're going to be quality, good teams. And they're just going to play each other and beat each other up. And then whoever has the who has the best record coming out of that will go to Arlington. It's just that simple. And so it'll be fun. The parity now is right now in this season is crazy. It's just going to get even crazier next year.
Yeah, and I think with 16 teams in the Big 12 starting next year, that's going to help with the beating each other up, because you saw whenever there were 10 teams in the Big 12 and had the round robin schedule, I mean, chaos always happened. There always seemed to be those games the last 2 or 3 weeks of the year that would knock a team out of national championship contention, and suddenly the Big 12 didn't have anyone there.
Yeah.
I think, maybe with these teams, some aren't going to always have to play until they get to Arlington, and that's could be a de facto,
Yeah, I mean, you can see like in Oklahoma State, in the next coming years, like let's say Oklahoma State and Utah, like they'll play next year, but then after that, they could just meet in that next season. The only time they'll play is probably that they meet in the Big 12 championship, which would be insane because that's just how the conference is going to be next year with 16 teams, and so I think that creates a lot more exciting matchups in the Big 12 championship and a lot more exciting matchups in the regular season as well.
Definitely a lot of excitement in the next few years, but we're focused on Bedlam this weekend. So can't wait to see that game and how it's going to go. Any final thoughts on the game, Nick?
Just excited. Everyone should enjoy the last Bedlam for the foreseeable future. All the fans should have fun, and it'll be fun. The two teams are coming in extremely competitive and extremely hot right now, and so yeah, just like I said, can't wait for Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, one last go at Bedlam, and it's fitting that it has some high stakes like so many matchups have in the past. That'll do it for this week's All Pokes podcast. I'm Ivan White. That's Nick Friesen. We'll see you next week.